3 and you're watching Breakfast on GB News with Anne Diamond and me, Ellie Costello, and happy Sunday to you. Now it's time to go through the Sunday papers for you. Joining us this morning is the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and deputy editor of Spite, Fraser Myers. Good morning to you both. You've been fantastic all morning. Dawn, we'll start with you, shall we? And the cost of living crisis and public pools.
Yeah, good morning. This is an intriguing one because of all the cost of living crisis that we're facing and the list of worries we have. This isn't an area I actually thought of, but evidently hundreds of swimming pools across Britain are facing closure because they're unable to cope with rising energy bills. Pool operators are planning to reduce opening hours, turn down the temperature, and most of them are freezing. Yeah. I know, you've been in that pool as well. Most of them are freezing anyway. Turn down the temperature of the water and even ask swimmers to reduce the time they spend in the showers to save money. I mean, it's not, in the great scheme of things, obviously it's really not the worst thing that could happen to us. But it's been calculated the cost of heating Britain's pools could rise to 1.25 billion this year from 500 million a couple of years ago. As I said, it's not something that I was particularly worried about, but now when you think of it, that's... Well, yeah, absolutely. And with their
people aren't going to go swimming if it's cold.
Yeah.
So their whole business model sort of collapses.
Exactly. And a lot of pools are facing closure. And it's like, when you think with the obesity crisis we already face in this country, it's so important that people sort of do some form of exercise, and swimming is so important for a lot of people, especially if you're elderly. My mum goes swimming every week. It's so important for her mental health as well as her physical health, because she can't sort of go run or cycling or something. So swimming for a lot of elderly people is so important.
And for families, it's lovely thing to do with the kids at half term is to take them to swim.
Yeah, of course. So it's a worrying aspect. It's like, on a long list of worrying things.
Yeah,
this is
you really do feel, oh my goodness, we're in a recession.
Yeah,
you can't go swimming.
Where's it going to stop?
It's a reminder that this energy crisis impacts way more than households.
Yes.
Quite understandably, you talk a lot about the pain that, consumers are facing, but businesses and the public sector are facing trouble paying their energy bills as well, and that ultimately then gets passed on to us, either through reduced services or higher costs. There's talk about schools being unable to afford, food for meals, things like that as a result. It's really, really shocking.
You used to say take the kids and go spend the afternoon in the library or something. If you're going to find yourself in a really very cool or cold old building, it's not going to be a very nice thing either. So yes, it's going to impact much more than just families, isn't it?
It is,
And it does mean ultimately that the prices of going to these places will go up. But one thing that's not going up is wages, Fraser.
Yeah, so around 68% of people say they've either considered asking their boss for a pay rise or have asked, but only 5% of people have managed to get an above inflation pay rise. Now, obviously, with inflation at 9%, that is asking a lot. But this is one of the key problems with the cost of living crisis. It's not just the rising prices, it's the fact that wages have been stagnant, not just recently, not just because of the coronavirus recession, not just as we're coming out of that, or, this has been a perennial problem for the British economy for about 40 years or so. Wages have not really kept up with rising prices, particularly not with the cost of housing, particularly not with the cost of energy. And I think the government has their head in the sand a little bit. I think they've, all of the ideas that have come up today, talking about the, petrol stations, or even the kind of relief package that was announced early this week, they're all very reactive. They're responding to this immediate crisis, but really we have much, much deeper problems in the British economy that we need to sort out so that we can have rising wages and people get the pay that they deserve.
And we can afford to heat our swimming pools.
Exactly.
How are we going to do that, though? How is the government going to achieve that?
That's the sort of million-dollar question, isn't it? I think, so some of the things that we could do is we could have a more serious energy policy. We should be thinking about how can we make energy cheaper? How can we have a security of supply for energy? We should also be thinking about a kind of industrial strategy. How can we bring jobs back on shore? That kind of thing. The government is making noises in those directions, but often it's responding to problems and not thinking forward ahead about the kind of economy we need. Or Boris is he blusters about wanting a high wage economy, but doesn't have any of the plans to make that happen.
No, I mean, they were very proud of their net zero policy, but now it seems to be not really right for the times, a lot of people will say.
Can't afford it, basically, can we?
No, but there's nothing else, because we haven't put in action any plans good 10 years ago. we've got nothing to fall back on.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the kind of the green policies are supposed to, you know, we're supposedly divesting from oil and fossil fuels and then money going into kind of more renewable sources. That hasn't really happened. So we've had the lack of investment in fossil fuels and then nothing to take up the slack.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why we have this energy crisis.
Instead, we rely on places like Russia.
Yeah. Or Qatar, or, you know.
Yeah, it's
that was a
worrying.
mistake. Yes, Dawn. Single-sex spaces. This is about a trans prisoner.
Yeah, this is it's an exclusive in the Sunday Mirror today, and it's quite worrying because it's something that, you know, feminists, women's rights groups have been talking about, and people are going, it's not happening. Basically, a transgender inmate at a woman's jail was caught having drunken sex with another prisoner. Now, the prisoner is still, it identifies as a woman but still has male private parts, 43-year-old, who is a murderer.
In a women's prison?
In a women's prison, yeah. Is 43-year-old, is a murderer and was found having sex with a much younger, described as, and vulnerable inmate. Now, I mean, this is in Surrey. It is in HMP Bronzefield, and they've launched an urgent inquiry over it. The police have not been called, however, and a lot of women in this particular prison are very troubled and vulnerable. And, you know, I do have to ask, Anne, why identifying as female but fully functioning male parts is allowed.
Is it in a women's prison?
In a women's prison, a particular one that specialises in housing vulnerable prisoners. It is worrying, and this isn't the first time it's happened, and unfortunately I don't think it'll be the last.
But we wouldn't be shocked to hear a story where one woman prisoner was having sex with another woman prisoner, would we?
No.
The thing that is making the headline here and concerning people is that one of them was trans.
And has,
as you say, fully functioning
male parts. And it's you know, the prisoner has now been removed and put into a prison that has a special transgender unit.
Well, that's just what I was going to say. Where should that person be?
Well, evidently they are now. Most prisons are considering, if they haven't already done so, having transgender units where people who are transgender are housed separately. Because I just think it's very unfair. I mean, the implication here is that, you know, it was drunk. I mean, there was illegal brew in the prison for a start, but it was drunken sex, and the younger, the female wasn't exactly as consenting as she should have been.
Are they sharing a cell? Is that what the story
It doesn't go into that much detail, Ellie, unfortunately, but it's just very worrying that this has happened.
And it's not a one-off either. I remember there was a notorious case, I think 2017, 2018, of someone called themselves Karen White, was a convicted paedophile and didn't have a kind of gender recognition certificate, you know, wasn't known to be living as trans before they were arrested and in prison, decided to transition in prison and put in a women's prison, and then went on to sexually assault several female inmates.
Yeah.
And you think, didn't someone think, hang on a second, do we need to do this? Is there not another way around this?
Yeah, that was Newhall Jail in Yorkshire, wasn't it? Paul and Stephen Wood, and was...
but that just shows that the complex problem, even being faced now, when we talk about this trans issue in schools, but even being faced now by the prison system.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
They're having to think about how is best to deal with people with complex issues.
Very complex, and the solution has to be to have separate areas for transgender prisoners, doesn't it? Because that Stephen Hall was actually serving time for indecent assault and sex attacks, and then identifies as female and is housed in a female prison.
And there hasn't been a change in the law either. So, you know, you have essentially a policy of self-identification across the public sector, even though the government or Parliament has never agreed to self-identification as a law. So these things are changing without the proper debate, without the consent of the public, and that's a real worry.
Well, we've run out of time, sadly. I know you've got more stories
I have another
for us.
prison story.
There's a lot of stories in the Sunday papers, as ever. When you're not in here, do you just sort of have your bed covered in Sunday newspapers? It takes all day.
And the floor as well.
Yeah.
It's like the husband gets up and slips over parts of newspapers.
We can allow you 1 minute. We can allow you 1 minute.
Right, okay, this is a very, very funny story. End on a high note. This is prison officers have been told not to shout at prisoners in case it upsets them, and you're not allowed to refer to them by their surname anymore, because that is now considered offensive.
Oh dear, oh dear.
So,
Okay. Well,
But for
Can't
prisons.
say, oi, Diamond, over here. You can't do that. No, that's offensive. No, that's offensive.
well, it would upset me. Thanks very very much, Dawn. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much,
Great
Dawn.
to see you.